Welcome to the channel where the most thrilling and inspiring stories come to life. Today we bring you a gripping tale of bravery, unity and survival against impossible odds in a world where chaos reigns and the undead rise. Only the strongest hearts can lead the way, and today you will witness the courage of a few standing against many. This story is packed with suspense, heart-pounding moments and powerful lessons about never giving up. If you love stories of determination and heroism, you are in the right place. Sit back and get ready to embark on an unforgettable journey into a world where every decision could mean life or death. Before we dive into this epic adventure, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss another incredible story. Your support keeps these amazing journeys coming. Thank you for being part of our growing family. Now let's begin. The air was thick with tension as the sun dipped below the jagged ruins of what was once a thriving city. Among the crumbled buildings and twisted metal, a group of survivors moved silently, each step cautious, every sound a potential signal of doom. They had learned the hard way that in this new world trust and vigilance were the keys to survival. Among them was Marcus, a former firefighter whose broad shoulders and unwavering stare made him a natural leader. Beside him moved Elena, a sharp-eyed medic who had saved more lives than she could count with nothing more than thread needles and scraps of cloth. Close behind them were twins Alex and Sam, both quick on their feet and even quicker with their makeshift weapons. Together they formed the heart of a small but determined band of warriors. The rumors had started just days earlier, whispers of a massive horde of the undead moving south, devouring everything in its path. Some survivors dismissed it as fear-mongering, but Marcus knew better. They had seen too many small towns vanish into silence overnight. This time the threat was real, and it was coming for them. As night fell, they reached their temporary shelter, an old abandoned warehouse fortified with whatever materials they could scavenge. Steel bars covered the windows, wooden barricades blocked the doors, and lookouts were stationed on the roof. Marcus called everyone together in a circle, lanterns casting flickering shadows on their worn faces. "We do not run," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "We stand our ground, we protect each other, we survive together." The words carried a heavy weight but also a flicker of hope. No one dared to disagree. They had lost too much already: homes, families, dreams. They would not lose each other. The night was restless, every creak of the building, every gust of wind sending chills down their spines. But it was just past midnight when the lookout shouted a warning. Lights were extinguished, weapons were raised, hearts pounded in silent unison. Out of the darkness came the first figures, shuffling, dragging broken limbs, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The horde had arrived. At first it was just a handful, but soon dozens, then hundreds filled the streets, moving like a single terrible organism. The defenders held their breath, watching, waiting. Marcus signaled, and with a battle cry that shook the night, they unleashed their defenses. Flaming arrows soared into the front ranks, Molotov cocktails exploded with furious light, and the stench of burning flesh filled the air. Barriers held firm at first, and the warriors fought bravely, driving back the relentless tide. Elena darted from fighter to fighter, treating wounds and giving encouragement. Her hands never stopped moving even when the enemy closed in. Alex and Sam moved with a deadly rhythm, covering each other and striking with savage precision. But the zombies did not tire, they did not fear, they simply kept coming, wave after wave, hammering the defenses. Marcus realized with a sinking heart that they would need more than strength to survive the night. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. He shouted for a retreat back into the heart of the warehouse, where they had set up a last line of defense. Everyone moved swiftly, pulling back while maintaining cover. The warehouse would become their fortress and perhaps their tomb if they failed. As they regrouped inside the barricades, Marcus looked around at the faces of his friends, faces full of fear yet lit with an unbreakable spark. He clenched his fists, determined they would not go quietly into the dark. They would fight with everything they had. Outside, the groaning masses slammed against the walls, the sound echoing through the night. The battle for survival had truly begun, and there was no turning back. As the relentless sound of the undead pounding against the warehouse walls grew louder, Marcus stood in the center of the makeshift command post, his mind racing. The walls wouldn't hold forever. He had seen it too many times before. The dead always found a way. The fire had slowed them down, but it hadn't stopped them. And now, trapped inside with limited ammunition and no escape route, time was running out. "Elena, how's everyone holding up?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but laced with the tension of their situation. Elena knelt beside a wounded fighter, her hands stained with blood, but her focus unwavering. "We're losing people," she said, looking up with concern. "The injuries are mounting, and there's nothing more I can do. We can't patch up the whole team with what we have." Marcus cursed under his breath. He had been hoping for a miracle, some sign that help was on the way, but deep down, he knew they were on their own. They had no backup. No reinforcements. Just a handful of warriors against a seemingly endless wave of undead. We need to buy ourselves some time, Marcus said, his mind already working through the possibilities. Alex, Sam, get to the upper levels. We need eyes on the outside. We need to know what we're up against. The twins nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Without a word, they scaled the nearest ladder and disappeared into the shadows of the upper floors. Marcus turned to the others, his gaze sweeping over their faces. He could see the fear in their eyes, fear of the unknown, fear of the Horde, but also something else. Something stronger. The will to survive. He had seen it in these faces before, in countless other survivors, and it was this that would make them dangerous. Minutes passed like hours, and the tension only grew. The sound of shuffling feet, growls, and occasional screams filled the air as the zombies outside grew more frantic. There was something different about this horde, more organized, more determined. They weren't just mindlessly roaming anymore. They were attacking with purpose, pushing against the barriers, as if they knew exactly what they wanted. It wasn't just about feeding, they were looking for something. We've got a problem, Sam's voice crackled through the radio, breaking the silence like a gunshot. They're moving in from all sides. We can't hold them back much longer. Marcus tightened his grip on his weapon. He knew that once the horde fully surrounded them, there would be no escape. He had to act fast, or they would all be trapped. Where's the weak point? Marcus asked, his mind working quickly. There's a gap on the east side, Alex's voice joined in, sounding just as strained. But it won't last long. They're pushing hard. Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was about to come. Elena, get the wounded to the back. I'm going to need you to take care of anyone who can't fight. Elena nodded, already moving into action. Be careful, Marcus. We all need you. Marcus gave her a tight nod and turned to the others. We hold the east side. Sam, Alex, we'll need you up top to cover us. Everyone else, get ready. This is it. The battle was about to escalate, and Marcus knew that they had only one chance to turn the tide. As he and the remaining fighters moved toward the east wall, the air seemed to grow thicker, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. They had no choice but to fight. To stand strong. A thunderous crash sounded from the east side, followed by a chorus of snarling, growling zombies that seemed to pour through the gap like an unstoppable flood. The warriors on the front line fired their weapons, aiming for the heads of the zombies, but the sheer number of them made it nearly impossible to stop the advance. For every one that fell, two more took its place. Keep them back. Hold the line. Marcus shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. Elena's voice echoed from the back, we're losing people, Marcus, we need to fall back. Marcus clenched his teeth, fighting back the urge to panic. Not yet. We keep fighting. We have to. But the truth was, even Marcus wasn't sure how much longer they could keep up the fight. They were surrounded. The horde had closed in on all sides, and the building itself groaned under the pressure. He could feel it in his bones, the walls would give way sooner or later. Through the cacophony of battle, a sudden loud crack echoed through the warehouse, the east wall began to buckle. Marcus's heart dropped into his stomach. They were running out of time. Everyone, back! Now, he shouted, signaling the retreat. But it was too late. The zombies poured in through the east wall, overwhelming the front lines. Screams echoed as the survivors were cut down one by one. Elena was already pulling the wounded back, but it wasn't enough. They had to retreat to the heart of the warehouse. There, they could regroup and plan their next move. Keep moving. Get to the back. Marcus ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. They sprinted, dodging the snapping jaws of the undead, firing as they ran. The rear of the warehouse was a maze of old crates and storage areas. If they could get there, they might have a chance to hold their ground. Marcus glanced over his shoulder, seeing the mass of undead surging forward, their groans filling the air like a tidal wave. He turned back to the others. This is it. We fight until we can't. The survivors had made it to the rear of the warehouse, but they were far from safe. The space was cluttered with old machinery, crates, and shelves, forming a narrow maze that would either provide cover or become their tomb if they didn't act quickly. Marcus's mind raced as he scanned the room, trying to find any advantage they could use to their benefit. "We've got to fortify this area," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stack the crates, block the exits, anything we can do to slow them down." Alex and Sam moved without hesitation, quickly dragging crates into position and stacking them against the walls. Elena helped the injured find temporary shelter behind the debris, tending to their wounds as best as she could under the growing pressure. But it was clear that their options were running thin. The undead were closing in, and the warehouse, though large, was not built to withstand an assault of this magnitude. Outside, the Horde continued to push, their numbers seemingly endless. The sounds of groaning, gnashing teeth, and the occasional thud of a body hitting the floor grew louder and louder. The zombies were relentless, and every inch they gained brought them closer to the survivors' fragile defense. "They're coming from all sides," Alex said, her voice tight with panic. "We can't hold them here forever." Marcus gritted his teeth. He knew the truth of her words, but he refused to give in to fear. "We're not running. Not yet. We'll make our stand here." He turned to Elena, who was tending to a wounded man near the back corner. "How many do we have left?" he asked, his voice grim. Elena looked up, her face pale but determined. "Not many. We've lost half our fighters, and the rest are barely holding it together." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. His eyes swept over the remaining warriors, tired, injured, but still standing. They were the last hope. If they fell, the rest of the city would fall too. This warehouse, this small group of survivors, was the last line of defense against the undead wave that threatened to swallow everything. "I need everyone to focus," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the room. "We fight as one. We've got the best chance if we stay together. Protect the weak. Protect each other. We make it through this, and we live to fight another day." The survivors nodded, their fear replaced with something else, resolve. They were in this together, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. The first wave hit harder than Marcus expected. The zombies swarmed the front of the warehouse, forcing their way through the makeshift barricade of crates with terrifying speed. Their rotting hands scraped against the steel and wood, and their snarls filled the air, sending chills down Marcus's spine. He knew they were moments away from being overrun if they didn't act fast. "Alex! Sam! Get on the upper levels. I need cover fire," Marcus shouted, his eyes never leaving the advancing horde. Without a word, the twins sprinted to the stairs that led to the catwalk above, positioning themselves strategically to get the best angles. From there, they began firing down into the masses of zombies below, picking off any that got too close to the barricades. Elena grabbed her makeshift weapon, a sharpened metal rod, and positioned herself at the front of the group, ready to strike. She was small and agile, but her experience as a medic had taught her to fight in any way she could. And now, her skills would be put to the test. Marcus moved to the front, weapon in hand, as the first wave of zombies crashed into the barricades. He swung his axe with precision, severing limbs and smashing skulls as the undead pressed forward. The sound of his weapon striking the creatures was sickening, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. Every swing, every strike, was a chance to stay alive. But the numbers were overwhelming. For every zombie that fell, 2 more took its place, climbing over their fallen comrades in a mindless rush. It was like fighting a tide, trying to hold back a flood of death with nothing but a single dam. "Keep fighting," Marcus yelled, his voice breaking through the chaos. "We're not finished yet." The survivors pushed forward, but the horde was relentless. Slowly, the barricades began to crumble. The zombies tore through the defenses, their hunger driving them to break through anything that stood in their way. Marcus knew they had to move, or they would be trapped. "Elena, fall back!" Marcus shouted. "Now!" Elena hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the room, before nodding grimly and leading the others toward a small hallway at the far end of the warehouse. It wasn't much, but it would give them a few more moments before the zombies overwhelmed them completely. Sam and Alex, still on the catwalk, continued to provide cover fire, but the onslaught was unrelenting. The zombies climbed over the barricades, filling the space with their unholy presence. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the survivors could feel the heat of the fire as it spread throughout the room, igniting the remnants of the debris. Marcus grabbed one of the last grenades from his belt, pulling the pin and tossing it into the mass of zombies at the front. The explosion sent a shockwave through the warehouse, throwing bodies in every direction and buying the survivors a few more precious seconds. "Move," he shouted, his voice a command rather than a plea. The group scrambled down the hallway, running as fast as they could, hearts pounding in their chests. But the sound of the Horde's footsteps was growing louder. They were getting closer. "Are we going to make it out?" one of the fighters gasped, their voice full of fear. Marcus glanced back at the group, determination in his eyes. "We will," he said firmly. "We fight together, or we die together. But we don't give up." With one last glance over his shoulder, Marcus led the survivors into the darkness ahead, the echoing sounds of the undead growing ever closer. The hallway stretched out before them, a dark, claustrophobic space filled with the sounds of their hurried footsteps and the distant moans of the Horde closing in behind. The survivors pushed forward, their exhaustion beginning to take its toll, but their determination remained unbroken. Every instinct told them to keep running, but Marcus knew they couldn't outrun the zombies forever. They had to make a stand, and they had to do it soon. "Keep moving," Marcus barked, urging everyone forward. "We can't stop now." They moved as quickly as they could, but the weight of their injuries, the constant fear, and the endless adrenaline began to wear on them. Elena, though still strong, was visibly exhausted. The medical supplies she'd carried were long gone, and the wounds of the survivors were beginning to take a toll on her as well. "We're almost out of time," Elena said, her voice tight with fatigue as she glanced over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the dark passageway. "We need a plan. Now." Marcus didn't have a clear answer. They were running low on supplies. They were outgunned. And they were running out of options. But one thing kept him going, the need to protect the people he had come to see as family. They had fought for each other, survived together, and he would not let them die here. "I know," Marcus said, his voice low but resolute. "We'll make it to the roof. It's the only place with a vantage point. From there, we can get a better view of the Horde and decide our next move." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was the best they had. The roof might offer a slight advantage, maybe they could hold the high ground for a while longer. Maybe it would give them the time they needed to figure out how to escape this nightmare. Alex and Sam moved ahead, scouting the area. The twins were quick, their reflexes honed from years of surviving in a world that demanded speed and precision. They had always been a step ahead, and right now, that was a blessing. Every corner they turned, every door they opened, was checked for danger before anyone followed. The roof was just ahead, but as they approached the final set of stairs, Marcus heard something that froze his blood. A loud crash followed by a series of shrill moans echoed from the lower levels of the warehouse. The zombies had found another way up. "Get to the roof, now!" Marcus shouted, his voice rising with urgency. There was no time to waste. The group rushed up the stairs, but the sound of the zombies gaining ground was unmistakable. The survivors burst onto the roof, their lungs burning, their hearts racing. They slammed the door shut behind them, blocking it with a piece of metal that had been lying around. But Marcus knew this was only a temporary solution. They had only moments before the undead would find another way up. The roof was high, but not high enough to guarantee their safety. As the survivors gathered together, they took a moment to catch their breath. The night air felt cool against their skin, a stark contrast to the heat of the battle below. But there was no time to rest. They had to plan their next move, and fast. Looking out over the city, Marcus saw the sea of undead stretching into the distance. The Horde was vast, its numbers growing by the minute. But for the first time in hours, Marcus could see something else: hope. A small light flickered in the distance, a signal from another group of survivors, perhaps. "We're not alone," Sam said, her voice filled with disbelief as she pointed toward the flickering light. "There's someone else out there." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could there be more survivors who had made it out? It could be a trap, Elena cautioned, her voice wary but still filled with a flicker of hope. "We can't risk it." Marcus's eyes narrowed. There was no way to know for sure, but they had to try. If there was even the slightest chance of help, they couldn't ignore it. "We don't have a choice," Marcus said firmly. "We need to find out. If there's anyone out there, there are only hope." With no other option left, the survivors began to formulate their plan. They had to move quickly and quietly, any misstep could be their last. Alex and Sam would scout ahead, using their agility to navigate the rooftops and avoid the zombies below. Elena would stay with the injured, providing whatever support she could. Marcus would lead the charge, ready to fight to the bitter end if it came to that. As the survivors prepared to leave their temporary sanctuary on the roof, Marcus's mind raced. The journey ahead would be treacherous, and they had no idea what awaited them. The zombies were relentless, and the world outside was a wasteland. But the one thing that had kept them alive this long was their will to fight, to never give up, no matter the odds. The light in the distance continued to flicker, a faint glimmer of hope in the darkness. It was their only chance, their only way out. They had to take it. "Stay close, keep quiet, and be ready for anything," Marcus ordered as they began to move. They climbed down the side of the building, moving along the narrow ledges and across the rooftops, always staying out of sight of the undead below. The city was eerily silent except for the occasional moan or screech as the zombies wandered aimlessly through the streets. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something more dangerous than just the undead. The survivors approached the edge of the city, the flickering light still visible in the distance. They had made it this far, but they knew the journey was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, fighting every step of the way. And as they moved toward that distant light, Marcus couldn't help but believe that they still had a chance, that they could survive this, if they stayed strong. Because as long as they had each other, they weren't done fighting.